All right, Ozan, I'm excited to chat with you. You are now running a company called OpenPayd. You started off as a medical doctor. Would love to hear a little bit about that transition. That seems like a fairly unusual transition to go from getting your medical degree to jumping in payments. Was there a moment in time when you realized that you wanted to make that transition, or how did that go precisely?
Well, I didn't go from medicine to payments. What I did was back in late 90s when I was at high school, me and a few friends, we were like building computers and then later on programming some basic websites. And then in Norway, that was kind of a test ground for Nokia and Ericsson back in the days. A youngster like us had cell phones. So the cell phone industry and mobile content was quite advanced in Norway. So me and a two other friends, we built a website where we're selling mobile content. And that website kind of evolved into becoming a social networking site. So we ended up building the largest social networking site for kids and teens in Norway back in 2005, 6, 7. That was before Facebook kind of came to Europe, but at least before Facebook swiped through the Norwegian market. So as we got into social media, naturally e-commerce was the next step. And once you start doing e-commerce, obviously payment becomes a challenge. And even in Norway, where everything is kind of super banked and we have a safe environment to do e-commerce, we realize there's a lot of friction on when it comes to payments. So that was kind of like my backdoor into financial technologies. And in the meantime, I finished my medical degree and had to work as a doctor because in Norway, universities are for free, but some educations, the government have certain expectations that you kind of serve your time. So yeah, so I didn't go from the clinic to the fintech space. I was doing stuff in the tech space before I ended up in financial technologies.
I'm so curious how it actually works on that medical side before we jump into anything else. When you finish your degree, it's free. You get a free medical degree paid for by other taxpayers. When you finish, if you did decide that you did not want to be a doctor, would there be a penalty or did they just look down upon it?
No. So in order to operate as a doctor in Norway, you need to have a license. So before you kind of finish medical school, you get a preliminary license that you can use under supervision of other doctors. But in order to operate on your own and kind of build your own practice or kind of take the academical path of becoming a more specialized doctor, you have to work at a hospital. And in my days, you had the government were expecting you to kind of serve certain months at the various hospitals or divisions to certify you. Nowadays is different. Now is like when you finish medical school, you have to apply for a job straight out of university, and you need to work 3 years to have your permanent license. If you don't do your time, you will not get a permanent license. So all your studies will be kind of a waste if you want to work as an MD.
I see. Yeah, so just a waste of time, really.
I know the concept of free universities might sound odd for a lot of the parts of the world, but in Norway, most education is free and the education is quite good. The quality is very high. But yeah, Norway is a different society, or the Nordic countries are very different from a lot of other countries.
How do you think that that changes as I wonder about higher education and the ability to evolve when it's paid for by the government, namely when all education is free and available online and people say someone from Norway was like, well, instead of going to school for 5 years to learn this technique, I'm going to like take a 6-month crash course that's way more efficient and it's completely free and it's online. It's from better teachers somewhere else in the world. Now, do you see that as kind of because that's how I understand the problem of higher education funded by the government is it can't evolve in that way as opposed to just free market. If there were private education providers, then they would shrink and other ones would grow.
Okay, it's an interesting topic. So if I was a programmer, I'm sure doing online courses or taking support from people all across the world would be as beneficial of me waking up and going to a physical building in Oslo to take that programming education. However, there are certain studies like medicine where practice is a huge part of the education itself. It's a craft. You cannot just read about it. Anyone can buy the same books that I bought when I was studying medicine, and anybody can also listen to lectures online from universities all around the world. But there are two specific things that are important. First of all, you need to learn the craft, and that means that you need to practice. And in order to practice, you need to be at a hospital, and that hospital need to have the capabilities to support students like us. It's a very costly and very challenging thing to let people with very little knowledge, aka students, touch and interfere with patients because these are real people that are in need of medical help. So you need to have institutions, and in Norway that's university hospitals, basically very large hospitals that are integrated with the university, where students like myself can have theory and on one hand and then practice on the other hand. It's very challenging. So so for medicine, I believe an online study wouldn't be a good solution, but for a lot of other things like music, computing, architecture, and a lot of other studies where theory is very important, maybe then it would work. I think also the notion that I understand, like because I've been to a lot to the US, so I understand the notion between government and private look like two opposites. But in Norway, there is a lot of competition, even if there is government hospitals and government universities. It's very hard to get in. It's extremely hard to get in. Like only the tip of the iceberg, the best of the best, are able to get into certain studies and certain universities. So you already have a selection. So when you have people which are highly motivated and high IQ and EQ or whatever, or good academical performance entering the university, the environment at the university have a very high level. So it's not like anybody can join in and the level is like mediocre. It's not like that. The competition is extremely high.
So generally, you're in favor of the structure of education in Nordic countries, it sounds like?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I'm not saying that everybody must go to university. I don't believe everybody should go down the academical path either. There are a lot of other jobs and craft opportunities or the way you can make living that is not related to academical performance. But having equal access to education and also making sure that at least your financial capabilities or abilities is not a limiting factor, I think is fundamental for success of any nation. In the US, you're very lucky because you're attracting a lot of talent from abroad. People from all around the world wants to come to the US to study. You are one of the largest markets for most things, anything from publishing academical stuff all the way to the business opportunities. So you have some benefits there, but I still think you have a lot of challenges on the educational side. And if you don't do something about it, you will be bypassed by other nations. And it's coming very, very soon.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to feel on education that the rub or the problem with publicly funded education is that it's not, I mean, it really is other people paying for the education of a few. And say you just missed the cutoff, they have very high standards, these publicly funded institutions, high standards for who can get in. Well, say you just missed the cutoff and now your second option is going to somewhere else and paying out of pocket. That means you're not only paying for your own education, you're also paying for the other people who got in through your own taxpayer dollars. So I tend to feel like that structure, like the people who are the smartest, who are the highest performing and the most industrious, the people who are the most aggressive when it comes to work and getting things done, they tend to be the ones who can pay off high loans, like doctors, engineers, lawyers. So I don't know what to think. I mean, I'm not convinced it's the only way, but it does seem like if there's going to be any high financial burden, a doctor, lawyer, engineer would be the type of person who could pay that off. Otherwise, it would be your average, your hospital worker, your teacher. Those are the people who are paying for the education of the people who do go to schools, go to higher education.
No, I agree. I think there are two ways of looking at it. First of all, obviously, if you have a high education, you probably end up in a high-paying job, and you should technically end up paying a lot of taxes. So to the point that somebody's paying for my
That's true.
education and then they are not benefiting from it, that's not theoretically true because I should be paying more taxes during my lifetime. So I pay up not only for myself, but I
True.
probably end up paying taxes for their children. And the second of all, there are certain professions that you need in society. You need police officers, you need an army, you need doctors, you need lawyers. There are some professions that is absolutely fundamental for a society to work or to be able to work at all. All educations and all professions have a role in the society, but certain roles are fundamental for the society to be functioning. So I don't think we should look at it from if it's free and how much tax we pay and what the kind of the cutoff is. I think it's more like, does everybody have a fair or equal chance to get an education? And if yes, how good is the education? What is the quality of the education? Because in a lot of countries, including the US, I believe education have almost become a business. Universities are run like businesses, and academical performance is the second priority. First priority is to make money. Second priority is to get the academical performance up there. So I think you have a handful of universities in the US, which is like the best of the best, like they are the index. And then you have a lot of universities and education facilities, which is more like factories. And I don't believe those factories are producing the outcome that US as a nation will need going forward. So,
Agreed.
but then again, US as a society is a very different society from the small, rich Nordic countries. So I'm not judging. This is just my observation about how things are done in the US.
Yeah, really fascinating to talk to you about this because I don't often talk to people from Nordic countries. So to hear your perspective on things, given that there's a lot of overlap in the culture, there's a lot of development when it comes to infrastructure, government attitude, I would say, like the Western philosophy of democratic electoral republics. But then there's certainly a difference in how major pillars of industry, healthcare, education, maybe you could argue transportation, those operate in quite a different way. And they both seem to be pros and cons. So I like digging into it to get a better grip as to how you feel about it, as opposed to just what people talk about on mainstream. But let's transition. I want to hear about what you're working on. So, so you started this business, OpenPayd, spelled OpenPayd. Where were you when you had this concept? Was it a sort of an epiphany moment? And the company's relatively new. You guys are at 124, 125 employees and started in, 4 years ago? So pretty quick growth.
So
I'd love to hear how you started it. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, after I was doing the social networking side and went into e-commerce, I started realizing that there were challenges all over the place. It was challenging getting a payment gateway up running. It was challenging to get bank accounts. It was challenging to get settlement accounts or FX services. Like whatever you were looking to do something, there was a challenge. And I couldn't quite figure out why we had this challenge, because in Norway, everyone have a bank account. Okay, so the unbanked population or the underbanked population in Norway is almost non-existing. It's very unheard of, at least in the business world, that your business is not banked. Okay, so, and if you're not banked, there is a way to kind of challenge your local bank and progress. But if you look outside Norway or outside the Nordics, at least, for most businesses, getting access to US dollar, extremely difficult. That sounds maybe odd when you're sitting in the US, but in Europe, for a business to actually have US dollar access, Big challenge. Okay, so we will get back to that topic. You guys need to do something about that. Okay, if not, you're going to lose out. Second of all, maintaining a banking relationship with any bank is either very costly, or the compliance is so strict, or lack of logic that is hard to maintain a relationship. And especially if you enter anything in the financial space, financial services, then the bar is so high that innovation will be killed off straight away. So my challenge was that wherever I was looking for a solution, I met closed door. So step by step, I tried to build something for my own business. I realized other businesses needed the same. And then I turned around and said, listen, I'm not going to focus on my own business as a retail offering. I'm going to focus on my own business as a B2B offering, basically helping other enterprises enable them to do their business. So it didn't happen overnight. It happened like step by step with all the struggles that came with it.
When you highlighted the problem specific to the U.S. with respect to European countries on accessing money by accessing the U.S. dollar, what do you mean exactly? Is it hard to why would a business in Europe need U.S. dollar, and why is it hard to get?
Okay. There might be some viewers or listeners that might disagree, but first of all, US dollar is the key currency for all trade globally. I don't care if you're trading in Turkish lira, Norwegian kroner, or even in rupees. At the end of the day, if you're doing cross-border transaction, US dollar is the default currency for that exchange, for that settlement. Most contracts will use US dollar nominated figures. So US dollar is something you cannot circumvent if you're doing any type of significant business in Europe or elsewhere. We have euro in Europe, and we have also a strong GBP, and we also have stable currencies like Swiss franc and Norwegian kroners and Swedish kroners. But once again, if you do international business, US dollar is key. European banks are extremely afraid of their US counterparts. So all European banks have one or another relationship with a US bank in order to settle in US dollar and clear the US dollar. I'm not going to go into too much details about how the banking network works, but you have to be a US bank to be able to hold US dollar. And so anyone else that are outside US have to date and make friends with a US bank. And everybody's afraid of that relationship because especially after the financial crisis in 2008 and how US went after European banks and other banks for tax evasion and a lot of other stuff. And also challenges around sanction and money laundering and so on and so forth. European banks specifically are extremely afraid of losing their US relationship. So if you're a business in Europe, especially in the financial industry, and you go to your local bank, whether it's Barclays or HSBC or Danske Bank or Credit Suisse or whoever, and you say you want to do financial services and you want a US dollar account, the likeliness of you getting a yes is close to zero. Let's say zero to be on the safe side. It's very hard. And even if you get access to US dollar, they will put so many limitations on the activities you can do on your US dollar balance that in reality, you have an account you can't use. It's a big challenge for the European industry. It's a big challenge for fintechs across the world. I don't think people in the US and the US banks are aware of the significance of that challenge. It pushes institutions like us and banks like us to go to other currencies. We're trying to go into crypto, other currencies. So we are shooting ourselves in the foot in the Western world by having this challenge.
Yeah, I was just about to use that same analogy. It does feel like that, right? It's like we're making it so we as in the US banks, I should say, are making it so difficult. And by proxy, the US government, because the US government impacts many of the restrictions on banks that we see imposed on the Western world and Europe. It is kind of, shooting yourself in the foot for sure. But maybe it's just a good thing in the end. It's hard to say whether things are good or bad because you don't know how they play out. When the pressure is so high as a founder to start this bank, that certainly opens up the pathway for crypto, which is nearly instantaneously transferred all across the world 24/7 at a much lower fee structure than banks. What does that start to look like? Are you seeing crypto being utilized as a real competitor to that U.S. banking to Europe relationship?
So first of all, let me say that I am a huge fan of blockchain. I run several businesses that are in the blockchain or the crypto space, but I don't agree with the arguments that you are trying to make right now. I don't believe the fees on crypto are lower. Actually, they are quite high, and we need to do something about that. And most of those blockchain and the cryptocurrencies that are in the market today are either very badly governed, so there's a huge liability and risk by using them, or they are so poor technological wise that using the old incumbent SWIFT system will be safer and faster. So blockchain per se have a huge future, but most of the current payment networks on blockchain and most of the current cryptocurrencies are not fit for purpose. And I'm happy to deep dive to each one of them, but I hear this argument very often that blockchain on current cryptocurrencies will solve something that we have right now. In the future, yes, but there are other challenges with the current setup that we need to address in order for cryptocurrencies, stable coins, security tokens, utility tokens to be competing with their twin brothers in the fiat world.
Yeah, I agree with you today. I think I was more thinking about it in the future. And even today, I feel like there's probably some pathway to making it better, faster, cheaper. But all in all, I mean, well, if you talk about the challenge of setting up a bank account, if you're a fintech company starting out in Europe and you're trying to start a bank account, like if you're talking about a 0% chance of opening up a bank account to transfer US dollars, well, I mean, it doesn't even matter what the price is, right? It could be like $50 per transaction on some blockchain. Yeah. It's still better than nothing.
I agree
you say
on
you
that.
run
I agree
multiple
on
crypto,
that. Yeah.
When you say you run multiple blockchain companies.
Yeah. So we like
go ahead. You go ahead.
Next to OpenPayd, we are involved in various projects where we have crypto licenses across Europe to provide on-ramp and off-ramp solutions and also payment solutions that are using some kind of stable coin, some kind of blockchain-backed service in behind the lines. So I'm quite confident that at least my experience. So yes, it takes me like 10 minutes, 15 minutes to go to one of those major exchanges in the world and open up an account. And technically I will have a USDT or USDC or whatever US-backed stablecoin live, right? But if I don't trust the institution I'm dealing with, or if my counterparty doesn't trust the institution I'm dealing with, or if the counterparty of the counterparty do not accept the source of funds, you're back to square one. So I can go to Coinbase and open an account and I can send money to your Kraken account. But when your US bank or your Swedish bank receive money from Kraken, will question you left, right, and center and block your account, even if you received your money in Swedish kroners or euro because you exchanged it at Kraken and paid out, you're back to square one. So there are a lot of the current setup, the current players in the space cannot replace the current incumbent fiat systems. But we are getting there. The fact that people in frontier markets, developing markets, poorer countries can actually go to larger exchanges and larger crypto providers and open an account so they can receive money from friends and family, pay for their studies, pay for medical bills, and so on and so forth. Or people can avoid the high remittance fees that are predominantly in place between rich countries and poor countries. That's great. So I see a lot of benefits in the mid and long term where cryptocurrencies and blockchain providers can have a real impact, not like a speculation and let's get rich tomorrow and go to the moon, but real impact on people's life. But for the Western world, for people in Europe, for most people in the US, you're still depending on a good financial service from a traditional banking provider. And that's a challenge for a lot of businesses.
So you have 125 people at OpenPayd, and you started the company 3-4 years ago. What do these people do? What's going on behind the scenes? Okay,
so OpenPayd have kind of 3 pillars. I need to tell you about those pillars so you understand what those people do. Number 1, we have a lot of licenses. Okay, without the license foundation, it's very hard to do business on top. So we have licenses, and we have people to look after those licenses. Anything from compliance, risk managers, legal people, people that can deal with the regulators, deal with the clients, and so on and so forth. Regulatory part. Second layer, technology. So obviously we are a tech company. So we have a lot of programmers, and not only just coders, but a lot of other people that support the whole product environment. And on top of that, you have the staff that are going out and selling, promoting, and handling the requests from the clients, and also learning about what's happening in the market, coming back to the team and telling them what we should be building going forward. So yeah, so those 120 something, they are all divided into three groups. They're either on the regulatory side, on the tech side, or on the sales and marketing side.
Got it. Okay. And on the licensing side, do you feel that the licenses are serving a real purpose and that they're approximately as expensive and time consuming as they ought to be? Or do you feel like we're in a world where these payment licenses are exorbitantly expensive and time consuming and don't serve all that much value? It's kind of a spectrum, right?
Yeah, on the first two parts, yes. I mean, obtaining a license today and maintaining the license, keeping the license is extremely challenging. Doesn't matter what type of license it is, either an MSB license in the US, email license in Europe, a banking license or a crypto registration or whatever. It's very, very difficult. I believe it's too difficult. It pushes a lot of people to operate in the gray zone or out of license. That's bad for the general public. It's bad for the provider, because having license means that you're following a set of rules, and those rules are meant to be protecting all of us. So I rather have people competing in the same space rather than people cheating around or being forced outside. But yes, it is very expensive. It's very hard to get. And do I see the real benefit? Well, for our business, we do, because our clients and our partners needs to know that we are playing by the same rules like they do. So having the license means a lot to us, but it should be easier to obtain a license, and it also should be easier to maintain a license.
Yeah, yeah. Did you guys raise money, or how do you fund the business now? Is it all just based on profit and revenue, or
no? We are actually in the process of raising money right now. But until now, we haven't been needed to raise money. We have been very, very lucky. When I started the business, we kind of we found a sweet spot in the market where whatever we were building was needed by others, and people were willing to pay for it in order to get it. So we went break even very quickly, and then we went profitable. So we haven't raised money at all, but we are in the process now to raise money, because we see that there's a lot of good competition out there, and they are well funded. They're growing very fast. And if we want to do this step by step, we will not be able to catch up with them. So right now we are in the process of raising money to kind of speed up the growth.
Awesome. And so far, self-funded? I mean, did you have a big exit and self-funded? To get to 125 people requires a lot of capital. I'm just curious what those early days were like, ramping up to.
We just started with, it was just 2 or 3 people in the beginning, and then become 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We grew. So we didn't jump from we didn't start with 25 people, then grew to 75 and then 125. We started with 3, 4 people, and then become 10, become 15, become 20, and then we grew. And I also I had several smaller companies, smaller startups that were doing their own thing in different space within the financial technologies. So at some point I said, I cannot have all of those small teams. It's counterproductive. Let's group them together. And that's how we created OpenPayd.
Okay. So, because I was going to say, with no funding in 3 years to get to 125 people, just seemed like the math didn't add up there. But it was, you had previously existing independent companies that you bulked together under one umbrella of OpenPayd. Got it.
Yeah.
That makes more sense. And so where do you spend your creative time nowadays? What sort of lights you up when you think about it the most?
Well, I'm lucky in this way that I'm exposed to a lot of the challenges crypto businesses have, remittance companies have, marketplaces have, gaming companies have. So I talk with merchants all the time. I talk with other business partners in the space all the time. So I get a lot of input about their local challenge. So when I get a local challenge, whether it's a marketplace in India or a crypto exchange in the US, it makes me start thinking.
Mm. Okay, got it. What's your process? Like if I'm working for Ozan, how do you feel like your operating style is unique? Do you you
First,
know?
first of all, nobody works for me. Nobody works for me.
Okay,
Okay, let's get that straight. We work together. Okay, so
okay,
that's the first thing people understand when they come to business. We are a flat business structure. I have my responsibilities, and everyone else have their responsibilities, but the hierarchy is very flat. So people are able to take their own decisions and execute, and not wait for somebody to approve. It's we are allowed to fail. We If you don't try, you will never fail. And I want people to fail because that shows that they have actually tried to achieve something. So that's something that we also emphasize. I know we are in a regulated business, so the limit between failure and catastrophe can be very short. So we have to be careful. We cannot just, back in
yeah,
the social networking days, just break things on the go, or just upload a new website, or just have a new code released. That's not how it works. But from an idea to execution, people are quite free to do what they believe is right. And we work in small teams where people actually have a saying. So I think that's also been the key to our success, that we listen very careful to our partners, and I'm not calling our clients, I'm calling them our partners, because I see the people we serve and give service to, they are our partners because we learn from them as well. So when we speak with our partners and very close to what they do, we can feel their pain. That means that we're adapting that pain and going back and seeing what we can do to kind of contribute to their growth.
gotcha. I have a note here that says you or OpenPayd together have authored the most extensive primary research report on embedded finance. Does that sound
Yeah,
right to you?
yeah.
Tell me
Well,
about that.
well, well, I didn't know if there was a lot of other reports out there. So if there are not many reports out there, we probably are the biggest one. I'm told it's the biggest one. Well, the report is about a lot of people have heard the term embedded finance. Embedded finance means that you're taking a financial services and embedding it into a non-financial service, or it could also be one financial service embedded into another financial service. Like when you come to a checkout page of your marketplace, you get a credit line on the go, or you pay now, so you buy now, you pay later, or you get an insurance or whatever. So a lot of companies in Europe are familiar with the term. That's kind of the outcome of the research, but very few have a strategy, or very few have implemented anything around it. So that's something that wasn't that surprising to us, but it also gave us a lot of appetite to engage more with our partners, because embedded finance is the future for most companies that are online. If you have a digital footprint, embedded finance is key for your success going forward. So in the US, you see a lot of offering about buy now, pay later. Successful companies from Europe, like Klarna from Sweden, have done well in the US market. But embedded finance is so much more. It's anything from what Uber is doing, where things are just happening in the background. You order a car, it comes and picks you up, and you leave. There is no cash, there is no card, there is no event around payments. It all happens in the background.
Got it. So that's when you think of embedded payments, that's what you think of. It's acting in the background, or is that the right definition of embedded payments?
Yeah. Basically, ideally, it will only happen in the background. But the key here is that you have an API to API integration, where embedded financial services is a financial services you provided to your audience, and your product and service might not be financial at all. So you're buying an airline ticket and you get a loan on the go. You're buying an airline ticket and you get some kind of insurance or something else in the background, or your payments happens without you being typing in your 16-digit card PAN number on the checkout page.
Hmm. Got it. And is that when you I'm curious your perspective on this. When you look at life in Norway and the Nordic countries, is there a day-to-day difference with, say, the U.S. or the U.K. when it comes to technology, access to any tools? Certainly, the banking industry, you said, is more consolidated. There's only a few banks there. Are there any core fundamental differences in either the payment industry or the technology landscape that that many people wouldn't necessarily see or appreciate?
Norway and the Nordics are very small markets. Okay, so nothing is big here. I mean, it's big in Norwegian figures, but it's not big in US figures. And there is not very much challenge on the payment and the financial side in Norway. A, we are very quick to adapt whatever we see abroad, and B, the room to maneuver internally in Norway is quite big. So Norway and the Nordics, from a payment perspective, for me, isn't that interesting. However, there are a lot of good payment companies coming out from the Nordics. There are a lot of good innovation happening in the Nordics. Unfortunately, a lot of those companies stay in Nordic, so you don't hear about them. The few you hear about, they end up in the US. So that's an interesting thing, that a lot of good tech companies are coming out of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, and Finland, and so on and so forth. But they don't have an impact on the world like Cash App or PayPal and so on and so forth. Klarna, obviously, a different thing. Spotify from Sweden. TransferWise, I believe, had some Swedish founders as well. So I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying, and I'm sure there are some in Denmark also. So if there are some Danish listeners, I don't want to upset our Scandinavian colleagues. But the Nordics are a very safe country. Let's look at Turkey, okay? Turkey is a very interesting market. First of all, I believe they have probably one of the most modern banking infrastructures, but it's still a society with a lot of cash. You have millions of refugees coming in from neighboring countries. So you have kind of two worlds running in parallel. So on one end, you have big banks that are extremely tech-oriented, more tech-oriented than you can believe, okay? And at the same time, in the same neighborhood, on the same street, you have people that are doing billions of dollars in trade in cash, literally next to each other. So if you go to Grand Bazaar in Istanbul or in the streets of various financial districts across Turkey, you will see the most modern bank where you can access the ATM just with your eyes or your voice. At the same time, you have people doing trade with cash or crypto. So crypto is very big in Turkey for a lot of reasons. I'm not going to go into all the details, but blockchain and crypto in Turkey is a major industry. I hear people say that crypto is banned in Turkey now and then. That's completely nonsense. So if anybody thinks that crypto or blockchain services are banned in Turkey, they got the news totally wrong. It is getting regulated, not banned, which is a good thing.
Right.
So when you look at developing countries, frontier markets, and the US, you see a lot of challenges are regarding remittance. People are trying to send and receive money. You need tech and innovation around that. You see a lot of e-commerce shops or e-commerce providers are struggling to do global e-commerce. It's very hard to get a card acquired that will allow multi-currency acquiring or settle in a way that will make your business profitable. So Nordic is not where I get my inspiration. Turkey, UK, US, Latin America, the Far East. And Far East, I mean, China, if you've seen what they're doing in China, and there are a lot of other challenges around China, but from the tech perspective and the way they embrace payment or embedded finance, they are another division. So that's where we should get our inspiration from.
Yeah. How do you stay so in touch with what's going on in other parts of the world, namely China? Are you going to China to see it firsthand, or are you reading? What are you reading to learn about all this?
Well, first of all, like the impact of the good companies, whether it's a Chinese company or a US company or any other nation's company, you feel it on your body day to day during business because they are taking market share. They are winning deals. They are growing very fast. You see the merchants are pivoting in that direction. So even if you don't go to those countries, if you just read the news or you just talk with your business partners, you will hear that they are taking market share. So if you put the few Chinese global companies aside, because there are other issues related to them that wouldn't function in Norway, wouldn't function in the US, like data privacy and other stuff of challenges that wouldn't be applicable in Europe. But their adoption of digital payment services, the adoption of KYC and AI, the adoption of both on the merchant side, like on the retail side and the consumer side, is very interesting. Because in a lot of countries, the chicken and the egg, like you're trying to offer something, but the merchant doesn't accept it. And because the merchant doesn't accept it, the retail clients are never adopting it. But what you see, at least in China, is that for a lot of different reasons, the merchants, the retail, the consumers, everybody have adopted it in very parallel. So this could be due to political pressure or regulation or just reducing cost, or they just jumped over whatever we're doing. So they went straight from cash into the super digital economy. While we in the Europe, or at least in Europe, we're catching up step by step. So obviously, I see competition. I see apps. I see launch of huge, cool products I've never heard of. So I cannot avoid to see my competition. Obviously, I read stuff as well. YouTube also have, and also podcasts like yourself. You learn a lot about new companies and a new way of thinking. So it's very, very, very interesting.
Yeah. Are there limitations now on the Chinese companies and what they can provision to Western countries like the US and Europe? Where are we on there's certainly a lot of talk of political agitation between China and the Western world and supply chain and all of that. But does that play out in the financial services sector where there's limitations on who you can offer businesses to, or who you can you do a deal with a payments company in China or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, most Chinese companies have their own restrictions on how they operate outside China. Let's start there, okay? And let's say WeChat or Alipay or the other company that we all know want to operate in Europe or in the US or any other country. Most likely they would need to either partner up with a company that have a license, or they need to get their own license. And you see that with UnionPay, or China UnionPay, or UnionPay in Europe at least, they are working the same way as Visa and Mastercard is doing. So they get people to sign up as a member, and then they have resellers on the ground. But if WeChat or some of the other more famous super apps or payment methods would approach a merchant in Europe, they wouldn't approach them directly. Usually they have resellers like WorldPay and others, FIS and others in Europe that have an agency relationship with them. So they are reselling their payment solution the same way they're reselling PayPal or Apple Pay or Google Play.
Got it. It's kind of interesting if you think about what's going on there. It's like because companies are this, it's like a pseudo corporation or a pseudo government in China, because they're so closely intertwined with the government. And it's not to say that doesn't happen in other countries. The US has the whole Edward Snowden prison program where the government had, ties with corporations, and we know that is a plausible, logical pathway for a government to gain control. And China's just a little bit more overt with their goings on. And the ability for people to make products and services and then trade, effectively they're just trading. They're building a software or some service or product, and they're trading it with people in other parts of the world. The ability to do so in software presents such a unique insight into a person's life. If you're using a piece of software, I can see so much more about you than if I just sold you a pair of shoes. I can see where you are. I can see how much you're using it, what time of day, who you're interacting with, pull in your social graph. And so it introduces a whole nother level of political consideration. If you think about, TikTok being I think TikTok is banned now. I want to say in India. I could be wrong on that, but I think that there's a lot of talks of like, should countries be allowing people to engage on social media networks or use other tools? It's like social media is just one industry where companies in other parts of the world can gain access to data. But that's of course true in other software services, banking in particular. And I can see both sides. Like there's not an obvious answer. It's not black and white. You can't just, if you were to allow every person in every country to trade openly with everybody, then you run up into a situation where like China had with the masks and surgical not surgical, medical gear. You know, if they're the sole producer of, say, masks or missiles or bombs or electric chips or some other critical thing for a society to function, then there's a power dynamic at play. You know, like say Norway would just it just doubled down on banking. It became like you built the best fintech in the world, and everyone's like, look, we're just going to Norway for fintech products. We're going to go to, you know, Hollywood for the movies. Because this is what happens in society, right? If there was total free trade, then there would be specialization pockets that would just run super deep. We already see the specialization pockets, like in the US, LA is entertainment, the Bay Area is tech. In China, you have Shenzhen is where they make like 90% of the world's goods. So there's these pockets of expertise. People tend to cluster together. So I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but it's something I've been.
I think the key here is, let's start with data protection. Okay. So if you look at the Western Hemisphere, you have two schemes dominating it, Visa and Mastercard. So why are they successful? Other than that, they were early entries and were well funded and have a good business plan and everything else. They went on with the local regulation. Okay. So there was very few people in the UK or Norway that had suspicion that Visa were extracting some kind of secret data and misusing it to have a move on the elections, or to control people's mindset, or to have any kind of unfair competitive advantage. So I think if we take a step back and say that if everybody needs to compete globally, we need to agree on the rules. And data protection, whether it's social media and Facebook, how they extract, or Google or Microsoft, or Visa and MasterCard, if we can agree on the rule set, then I think it's easier to let other people compete also. The fundamental challenge with companies that are Chinese-based, that are operating at least in Europe, and probably the same challenge in the US, is that the local governments are suspicious that there's something else going on, that data is being collected and shared or misused. And that's the challenge around Huawei, the telco provider or the handset provider, and also around WeChat and other type of payment methods. So I'm not saying that the reason to be suspicious is right or wrong. I'm just telling you this is what is concerning at least a lot of the Western regulators when it comes to product and services from regimes and countries which isn't as transparent as we are, at least what we believe we are in the Western world. Okay. So yeah, I mean, because I'm not going to spend too much discussing it, but I'm not saying it, as you said, it's not black and white. It's not like whatever we do in the US or Norway is picture perfect across the globe. But when a Malaysian company comes in, suddenly, we need to see what's under the bonnet. Every company is trying to take advantage of something, and that's how they're trying to kind of win market share. So, but yeah, right now there are mostly larger US players that are dominating the payment space, but I don't believe that will be the reality if you look into the future. Eventually, Chinese companies will have a bigger say. I expect China to have their first central bank issued digital currency. That will have some impact, not as much as people believe, but I believe it will have some impact, especially on trade between African countries or maybe some Latin American countries, and especially in the Asia Pacific, because right now a lot of those deals and remittances and payments for goods and services, even for small and medium-sized businesses, happens through some kind of US dollar exchange. So that will change. Will global countries, global powers change their oil pricing to the Chinese digital currency? Most likely not. But when China maybe trades with countries in the Middle East, they would do it. So things will happen. It will happen on multiple levels, and the impact will be felt in different ways depending on where you are in the hierarchy. If you're a payment provider, a consumer, a retail, a larger business, smaller business, how much international exposure you have as a business or an individual as well.
Interesting take. Yeah, I appreciate that. Are there other, I feel like you have such a good mind for the international affairs. Are there other things you wanted to add in respect to countries? You talked a bit about Turkey, you talked about China, certainly Norway and Norwegian countries. Yeah, I just want to throw it back at you. If there's anything that you wanted to throw out there that's been on your mind recently.
Yeah, there are a lot of things on my mind because I tend to keep thinking of various things all the time. But I feel overall the current payment system, the current banking network, whatever we want to label it, is not catering for the need of today. So let me put it this way. So internet is online 24/7. We do e-commerce 24/7. We buy and sell cryptocurrency 24/7, or we purchase anything around the clock. And we live in different time zones. So anywhere in the world, there is a holiday right now, there's a national day, there's a non-banking day. There is something going on that prohibits traditional banks from operating. This cannot go on like this. As a merchant, I cannot pray that US doesn't have a national holiday and that my money is not stuck at a German bank because they happen to have a Sunday, because I need to settle something in Hong Kong that happens to collide with the Chinese New Year. It doesn't work that way. So the current SWIFT-based settlement system where big banks around the world are clearing some money and they are doing some treasury management in the back, it doesn't work. So here is where I believe blockchain and cryptocurrencies can have a role. Even if they don't clear the money, maybe we can settle it, or vice versa. Like we need to find a way where I know that my FX exposure is what I expect it to be, and whatever I'm paying for the goods is actually the final price that I'm expected to pay. Right now, it's not like that. You have a lot of money in transit all the time. Currencies are fluctuating. The cost goes through the roof. And the worst thing is that it is the poorest among us, the poorest countries and the poorest people in any society in the US that are paying the highest price. It doesn't make sense. And it's counterproductive because we are excluding a large base of potential clients and partners by having these high fees on the ones that are actually needing the service. So we need to work on that. And if you see, and remittance is a key thing. You and I, we are middle class, upper middle class. So we don't do much remittance in our life. And if we do, we use Cash App or TransferWise or Revolut or whatever fintech app that we are used to. But for a vast majority of people, remittance is the key way for them to pay for their families, send money back home, pay for their children's education, healthcare, and so on and so forth. It's absolutely fundamental that the remittance cost goes down for people to actually survive, not enjoy, survive. We tend to forget that. And when you look at the cost of remittance from US to Latin America, from Europe to Africa, or from anywhere in the world, from the developed part of the world, back home to where people actually need this money, I mean, they're getting ripped off. There is no other way of telling it. They're getting ripped off. And just saying that, okay, let's switch to Bitcoin or whatever, doesn't solve it, okay? So I hear people say, oh, let's go, all switch to Bitcoin and the problem is solved. No, it's not. Bitcoin is also too expensive to send and receive, at least right now. And you don't have the use cases locally. You cannot go to a hospital in Philippines and pay for your surgery or for your medication in Bitcoin. And even if you did, Bitcoin is fluctuating too much. So I can go on, counter argue on that one. But we need to do something about the global payment system right now, and US need to lead. You guys are sleeping in class. It's a major issue. You guys need to travel outside the US and see how the rest of the world is operating, because the limitation you're putting on US dollar and the risk that comes with it, the cost goes through the roof.
Yeah. So the restriction on the US dollar is the primary driver. When you say sleeping in class, it's the same feeling as shooting yourself in the foot, where the restrictions on the US dollar as traded abroad are so high that it's introducing unnecessary friction for cross-border payments. Yeah. Start issuing your own currency. Start issuing your own central bank issued US dollar, and put some thresholds on it, and say that if people are sending like $300 back home to Nigeria or $200 to Mexico, like skip the whole KYC part. I'm just saying it straight up. Skip everything. Let people send money back home. If you're afraid that people will finance terrorism with $200, $300, I know you got it all wrong. That's not the problem. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think there's a strong, I think if it's like 0 to 10, 10 being the most, 1984 George Orwellian oversight that we want to not move towards. It feels like we're like after 9/11, when the Twin Towers went down and the Patriot Act was introduced, the Bank Secrecy Act, it's like the pendulum just went ding. It just went, hey, and it makes sense, right? It's like people in the US didn't feel safe. And so we said, hey, let's get together and make sure that the TSA pre-check takes off your shoes and make sure they check every crevice to make sure you don't have a bomb in the plane. And also that terrorists aren't going to be funded through every bank. So every transaction on every bank in the financial system in the world has to be able to be monitored and traced back to somebody. There's a lot of moral roots in that, but man, I'm on your side. It's like part of the big reason why I do this podcast is I like asking people about where they think we in the Western society on the regulatory compass. Like, are we properly calibrated here, or are we getting off track? Because we're off track. We're off track. And because we're off track, we are not getting safer. We are getting more unsafer. I mean, we would be insulting anyone with a bad intention would get insulted if we believe that we could stop them just by kind of querying $200 transaction from Dubai back to Philippines or from US to Mexico. I mean, we can laugh about it, but impact you would see in the Middle East among poor people, in Africa, in LATAM, and also in the Far East, that all of these restrictions that we're putting are pushing people towards cash. Cash is very expensive. It's far more dangerous. It has more privacy. It's another topic, but it is not fair. It's not fair. I concur. Yeah, it's sad. Well, I'm glad we talked about this. There are people listening to this, and it does change the direction of people's mindset, which I'm a big believer. Like, just put your ideas out in the universe, let it ripple. And then, that's, if you're not doing that, then you can't make an impact. But you have to just put the ideas out there, make compelling arguments, and then they stick. It's like maybe some lawyer listens to this, and 10 years from now, they're working in a Supreme Court case. And you never know, you never know how the world bends and turns and twists. So thank you so much, Ozan. I really enjoyed your perspective on things. I appreciate your, perspective is coming from Norway and everything you've done. So congrats on all the progress. Are you online? Do you write or tweet or have a social presence online?
I don't use social media. I don't use social media. I just started writing for Forbes. I think I have one article at Forbes at the moment. I am pushed by my team to start doing something, tweeting or doing something on LinkedIn or something similar. I'm in a thinking process. I'm coming from social networking background. I know how much digital footprint you leave, and I also don't want to spend too much time on the trolls online. That being said, as I mentioned, I have been starting to write for Forbes, and I will probably keep on doing that. But I mean, I'm happy to talk to anyone. And if somebody wants to publish something together with me, I'm happy to co-write with them. But Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a Twitter that I could like address you to. I don't have any
That's all
followers.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah, you don't need
yeah.
it. Good for you, man. You've accomplished a lot without it. So keep
Thank you,
keep
Mark.
chopping wood. All
Thank you.
right, take care, man.
Thank you.